There it
And
is.
we're live. And the countdown. And how do I put that left monitor? Cool.
All right. I can see it.
All right. I muted. I will mute. And good evening, and welcome to yet another edition of X-Plane Live, the voice of X-Plane. I'm Dave. Another Friday night. We are live to prove it. It is September 21st at 6:01 Central Time. So if you've joined us before, you know the routine. If you haven't, I'll explain it real quick. The show is all about you guys out there. It's all about X-Plane and flying in the real world. And what we do every couple of weeks, we get together. We have a very, very special guest tonight that we'll get to here in a second. Questions are welcomed. Comments are welcomed. If you're watching us on Twitch, which I hope you are, feel free to use the chat room. Tonight, we've got a guest who I am very excited to talk to and get in some detail with. Ryan Koch is his name, and you may or may not know the name, but he's got a lot of experience in real-world flying and also simulation, and also probably one of my favorite parts of simulation, which is Pilot Edge, which we'll get to in a second. Ryan, good evening and welcome to the show.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for agreeing to do it.
You bet.
Let's start off with you. Let's start off with, who you are, what you do.
Yeah, well, so I'm a flight instructor, and I do that part-time. So about one day a week, I go up to the local airport and do flight instruction. I do a lot of it on a simulator, on a touch trainer simulator. So we can talk about that later, I assume.
Sure. Don't be modest. You're a really good flight instructor. Your rating is a what?
I'm a double I.
Double I, which is not easy necessarily to get, but you do a lot of instruments. So keep going.
Yeah, mostly what I do is instrument instruction at this point. Yeah. So I do that. I do some remote coaching for Pilot Edge, which is instruction over Skype typically. And I can connect to someone else's, just screen sharing, see someone else's simulator, and we can do lessons that way. And my full-time day job is in software development.
You want to talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. It's nothing to do with aviation, but it's they're stats and strategy based PC sports games. So my main project is a golf game, but we've got baseball, football, basketball, and hockey.
Well, give them a plug. Give them this, if you want to.
Sure. Yeah. It's dksports.com.
And let me say, everybody listening, I just went there for the first time. I'll go back after we're done with the show. It's really cool what these guys do. If you're into any kind of sports management or sports strategy games, I never heard of them before 5 minutes ago, but it looks really cool what you guys are doing over there. You should be very proud.
Thanks. Yeah, they're not video games really, so it doesn't attract the same audience as most video games. But it's they're stats and strategy games. They're kind of coaching simulations, and if you're into strategy and stats, you'll probably like it.
All right, let's talk about real world flying before we get into explain simulation and Pilot Edge. Tell me about some of your experiences, because we share one that we talked about before the show began. Yeah.
So I learned to fly. I went to college for aviation. I went to St. Cloud State in Minnesota, and that was 2004 through 2008. So I got my private in 2004. Went through all the ratings then, instrument, commercial, onto flight instructor, and I started instructing in I think 2007. Instructed at St. Cloud for a couple of years. So yeah, I mean at this point I mostly do instrument instruction, like I said, mostly in 172s and some on the touch trainer simulator. The experience that we share that you referred to, I see you're just putting up the picture now, is
what kind of plane is that? It doesn't look familiar to me.
Doesn't it? No, it's a bright orange Boeing Stearman. So it's a World War II era primary trainer, and the airport manager and the head CFI at our airport has one and actually offers instruction in it, and it's an awesome experience. You know, if you're used to flying closed cockpits, the open cockpit biplane experience is something else.
It really is as close to flying like a bird that you're ever going to get, unless you jump off with a parachute or a flight suit on. How long have you been flying it?
The Stearman?
Yeah.
I only have probably 3 hours in the Stearman. He got it 2 summers ago. I think this is the second summer that he's had it.
And where are we flying here? I mean, don't give me the address. Is this up in Wisconsin?
Right. Yeah, this is Wisconsin. This is Wausau, Wisconsin. So it's actually a pretty scenic area for flying. And
what else do we fly?
Mostly at the moment, it's 172s and 150s. Back in the day when I was instructing in St. Cloud, we had a little more variety. We had Arrows and 182 RGs and Duchesses for multi-engine training, but it's all your basic general aviation trainer type stuff. Do you
have a preference of what you fly, or are you just like me and I don't care what it does as long as it has wings and an engine?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you ask me what my favorite plane to fly is, I'd have to go with the Stearman, because most of my other experiences is in more or less run of the mill trainers. I do have some Citabria time, which I like a lot too.
Right.
The tail wheel flying is a lot of fun.
What did you solo in?
I soloed in a 152.
Wow. I soloed in an Archer. And,
okay.
And you either love them or you hate them. I happen to love them. And people make fun of it all the time because it's my go-to airplane. I guess the first plane that you ever fly is your go-to airplane. And you
right.
just really feel comfortable in that particular plane. But like you know, I've had opportunities to fly a lot of different planes, and there's just something about it. Why did you want to become a pilot?
Well, it's a good segue, actually. One of the things that got me into flying when I was 10 years old or so is my uncle had an Archer.
See? So, I told you.
There you go. Yeah, so I guess I have a soft spot for the Archer, too. But yeah, so I was about 10 years old. I guess the thing that mainly got me into flying was Flight Simulator. So it was Microsoft Flight Simulator 5.1 at the time. So this was the mid-90s. And I had a friend who had it on his computer, and I always wanted to go over there and play with it. Then I got it on my computer, spent a lot of hours doing that as a 10-year-old. And then that combined with my uncle taking me for rides in his plane got me hooked. And so I knew at about 10 years old, that's what I wanted to do. I knew that's what I was going to go to college for. And so yeah, I mean, it was flight simulation that got me started in it, really.
And you went to St. Cloud.
Yep.
And you got a degree in professional flight.
Correct. Yep.
What is professional flight?
Well, it's so you go through all the ratings, and you've got classes to go along with each. So we did a private pilot ground school course as one of our college courses, and then a bunch of other flying classes, different aviation management classes. We had like a crew resource management class where we did some time in a Beech 1900 simulator. But it's a 4-year degree program in aviation, so it's a whole variety of those types of things.
Did you have a goal in mind? I mean, did you want to become a commercial pilot, or did you know you wanted to stay in the GA private sector with training?
Yeah, at the time when I was in college, I was probably leaning more towards corporate type flying over the airlines. I ended up having some medical issues shortly after college that forced me out of it for a bit, and picked up projects for my dad's company, and that turned into a full-time thing. But that was probably the goal at the time. I always liked flight instruction from right when I started doing it. And so I'm pretty happy with the balance I've got right now, where I'm doing the software thing, which I like full-time. I get my day or two a week instructing, and then I have the Pilot Edge remote coaching thing, and some other projects that I'm working on. But so I keep pretty busy, but it's a busy schedule full of different things that I like to do. So,
and really every day is completely different in aviation.
Yeah,
because you're dealing with variables that you can't control, weather and whatnot. Tell me about, and we'll come back to your flying. Let's get into the training program at the school.
At the flight school that I work at. Yeah, so I started out there a few years ago. I partnered with them on a simulator, which you just put up on the screen there. So that's a touch trainer from Fly the Sim, and it basically it's just X-Plane 10. I mean, it's the professional version, which is practically identical to the regular retail version. But then the panel that you see there is their own proprietary software, and it's on a touch screen, so you can load in different aircraft and different avionics, and not have to swap in and out hardware for each one. So it's a little more economical. So I do that probably about half my instruction time there now is on the touch trainer, and the other half is in the airplanes.
So I'm looking at this. All of your controls, everything dealing with the aircraft is right in front of you.
Right. So you've got a yoke or a side stick for the Cirrus setup, and you've got the throttle quadrants. There's a few different throttle quadrants, and of course the rudder pedals. And then everything else is touchscreen based. So like on that screen, you can see the gear handled out at the bottom. You operate that just by touching it. Flaps are similar, and it works pretty well. I mean, some things take a little getting used to, like the knobs. So the GPS knobs, especially, it takes a little bit of practice to get fluent in operating those. But the compromise is in you get all this extra functionality that you can get economically without having to get hardware. So
would the photo I'm looking at now, November 25, to Romeo Kilo, would that be an arrow?
Let's see.
What is that?
Yeah, I think that is an arrow. Yeah.
Because I see the autopilot on the bottom left that in our plane never works.
No, the Piper Auto Control 3B or something like that,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. So tell me about your students then. What age groups are we talking about on this thing?
It's a pretty big range because it's just it's a local airport that serves the local community rather than a college or something like that. So it's a whole range of people from there's some right out of high school or in their last year of high school who are looking to go to a aviation college and want to get their private before they go there, to older people who own their own plane out there and they're adding an instrument rating or whatever. So it's a pretty diverse range of ages and goals.
It's really interesting because I know here in Illinois when I went through my training, obviously we didn't have simulation. Not that it didn't exist. I had one at the house. And it helped me. So everything was ground school with textbooks and then, the flying part of it. This has got to help tremendously.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I try to build a lot of the ground instruction into the simulator sessions. So in the second half of the syllabus that I use for instrument training, we've got these scenario flights that are end-to-end flights on Pilot Edge, where I provide this written scenario and the student does the planning and comes back and flies a scenario on their own, and I can throw different things at them. I can coordinate with the controllers to close an airport for a disabled aircraft or something like that.
Can you get them to throw emergencies at you, right?
Yeah. Or I can fail things on the airplane too. But even beyond abnormal stuff, just getting in the routine of an actual flight in the simulator, if you do it right, the mindset can be identical to the real flight. So it's really valuable. But I try to incorporate some of the things that would traditionally just be ground school into these scenarios, so you get some actual experience with it.
What's your biggest challenge with students?
Let's see. It's a good question. I think sometimes it's just scheduling lately, because my schedule is pretty busy. Getting people to get on my schedule is often enough. When
and I can only relate to my world. I was very fortunate. I had the money up front. I paid for the training up front. So the only thing I had to worry about was getting to the airport. We talk about this in all the shows, that people want to learn how to fly and they'll save $100 and they'll take a flight and they got to wait 2 weeks till they get paid. And they spend the first half of the second flight reviewing what they did on the first one, because there's not enough memory training. You're not training the muscle of your brain to not have to think about it, just to do it.
Right.
You guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a little different in that this is a school that I sign up for. And granted, I'm dealing with your schedule, but it's more frequent than the average CFI out there and going to a local flying club. Am I right?
Well, I mean, we're just an FBO with a flight school, so it's not we're not affiliated with a college or anything like that. So it's still just people coming in for flight training. And but I guess one thing that is a challenge is getting people to practice on their own. And what I've tried to do for that is we offer simulator memberships.
Oh, perfect.
So most people that use the simulator, they're not paying hourly on it. They're paying up front for a 6-month membership or something, and then they can come in whenever they want and use it solo. And I try to provide specific things that they could practice at each step of the way. And I wish I was able to get people to take advantage of that a little bit more.
You're absolutely right. I can't tell you how many people I talk to about flying and taking lessons and trying to get them to understand how great having the simulator in the house is, or at the school. Yeah. Because other than the up and down motion and the wind in your face, it's exactly what you're going to face when you get there. all the procedures, all the ATC, all of the controls, all of the, you know, and one of the reasons that the guys started this X-Plane Learning Center was not so we can get together and play, quote unquote, the game of X-Plane. It's to give real world experience and how to use X-Plane in the real world if you're going there, or at least getting more enjoyment out of just playing a simulator on the computer. You know,
Right.
and if we get more people involved, we're using checklists and, you know, doing everything, quote unquote, by the book. The experience itself is so much more rewarding. You know, the one thing that we always had a problem with, which again, I think, in my opinion, is a great segue, was ATC. You've got the other people out there. You got VATSIM, Iveo, you got Pilot ATC, all these other ones. The thing I didn't like about the other ones was the fact that nobody on the other end took it seriously. There are exceptions to every rule. I get that. But I didn't want to talk to a 15-year-old kid in you know, Texas and have him yell at me because I didn't do something right. I wanted to, and it's not about the money. It's about the learning experience. And as I told you, you know, the first time, I'll never forget, my instructor took me down to a towered airport, Peoria, Illinois, and I blew it. I mean, big time. I was nervous. You know, again, a lot of it came from him because he wouldn't let me do what I needed to do. And, you know, unfortunately, the video's out there and the internet forever. But I came home, and that night, I don't know, by the grace of God, I found Pilot Edge. I'd never heard of it, but I found it. I don't even know how I found it. And I read a little bit, and I listened a little bit, and I watched a little bit, took out the credit card, and I signed up, started listening more in depth, started doing the CAT rating. So I want to spend some time talking about the Pilot Edge, what it's obviously mean to you, and where you see the advantages are. It's not a commercial per se. I'm not here endorsing it. I'm not getting paid to do it. You know, I've never met Keith, but, you know, I've listened to everything he has to say. Tell me, you know, your involvement and let's go deep into Pilot Edge for a few moments.
You bet. Yeah. And I'm not getting paid to endorse it either. I do remote coaching for them, but I'm just a fan, really. So yeah, I mean, your listeners probably are mostly familiar with basically what it is, right? It's a live ATC
let's explain.
service.
Let's pretend, and with all due respect to I know there's a lot of guys listening that know about it, but I'm hoping that the one guy, you know, joining us tonight for the first time, you go, what's Pilot Edge?
Right. So it's a live ATC service. So you connect to the network and you're talking to real people who are highly trained to act as controllers at Pilot Edge, and you just operate the radios the same way that you would in the real airplane. You tune the same frequencies, make the same radio calls, file flight plans where it's appropriate, don't file flight plans where you don't have to. But that's what's great about it, is you just operate the same way that you would in real life, and you get a realistic ATC service. Is it 18 hours a day now? I think 7 days a week.
Yeah, it's only like two and a half days a year you're not on. I mean, it's like New Year's, part of New Year's, part of Christmas, all of Christmas, I think. It's always there.
Right.
And the area that you cover now, when I say you know what I mean. Tell me about the area, because it did expand this year.
Right. There's two basic coverage areas. The first one is the ZLA region. So it's everything within the boundaries of Los Angeles Center's airspace. So this is Southern California, you know, Los Angeles down to San Diego, all the way up to Santa Barbara, all the way east to Las Vegas and the Grand Canyon. So it's a pretty good chunk of airspace, and every towered airport within there, I think there's close to 40 maybe. And then, of course, all the en route facilities in between, and the non-towered airports, you can operate on the traffic frequencies the same way that you would in the real world at those airports. And then I think it was a year or 2 years ago, Pilot Edge added the Western U.S. expansion, which is everything out to, I guess, east as far as Colorado.
I say North Dakota, South Dakota, the western edge of that line. If you go straight south, there's part of Kansas, part of Nebraska. It hasn't been 2 years, has it? Oh, please, that means my life went by really quick.
Yeah, I know. It's I think it's been a year.
Yeah, let's say a year to make David feel better tonight.
Fair enough. Yeah. And that's not every airport within that airspace. That'd be a ton of airports, but it's still kind of a ton of airports. It's something like something like 35 or 40. It's about the same amount of airports covered as there are in the ZLA region.
And it really is magical the way you guys put it together and how it works. And I don't want to expose any private secrets or anything, but the guys and gals behind the microphones, tell me about them.
Yeah, well, I'm not privy to any of the secrets either.
Oh, but, okay. Let's talk about secret. We'll make them up.
Yeah, right. No, I mean they're trained to the same level as real world controllers with respect to the airspace that they're with the pilot edge airspace, right? I think some have been retired controllers or some have been controllers in training and some aren't, but they're all paid. So you're getting someone who's paid to be there, right?
And quality.
They do quality. They do a fantastic job.
They really do. Everybody, I mean, anybody that's played on Pilot Edge and worked with it, Marcus is probably one of the more famous names. He does a great job. And there's a bunch of people, and we've rotated them over the years. I know we have new voices out there, and some old timers are out there. And when I say old timers, I don't mean 90-year-old guys. I mean guys that have been around for a while.
Right.
The one thing that I've talked to a lot of people about, they say, "Well, man, I got to talk to a real person." Yeah, you do. But here's the great thing: as in the real world, I found in the beginning, if I said that I was a student pilot, now I'm not going to fly out of Los Angeles International Airport on my first flight. I'm going to do the CAT ratings, which we'll get to here in a little bit. But I'm going to fly out of the little tiny airports, the San Luis Obispo type airports, and say, hey, I'm a student pilot. I want to just take a little VFR flight, departure to the north. They're very, very good about working with you, know, and your job as a pilot is to pay attention to what they're saying and repeat back what they said. It is a remarkable thing that you guys have been able to put together, and I hope it just keeps growing and growing and growing. You and I, before we went on the air, I did the CAT ratings, and I think I got to 8 or something, and I don't know why I stopped, but whatever happened, and I look back, it's been a while, and I feel kind of guilty, but. It's so worth it. Again, I pay for the ZLA, and it's $20 a month. I can go up and down the coast of California. I think for another $20, I can do the whole Western U.S.
And if you pay yearly, it's a little bit less too.
Yeah, you save a few bucks. Yeah. And you know what? It's not you're in for life. If you want to leave, they stop charging. If you want to come back, they start charging. It's very relaxed. It's a really, really great program. Now, what your involvement with Pilot Edge is the private tutoring, I'm going to call it. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's the remote coaching service. So we've got a number of prepackaged programs that you can fly, or if you have a specific thing that you want to work on, you can kind of do it a la carte too. And so I just connect to people over Skype, and I can see their simulator, and it's just like a normal flight lesson, really. I'm kind of sitting in the right seat, although I'm sitting in my office chair, and it works really well. So I've gone through the CAT ratings program with people, and I've gone through the I ratings program. I've worked with people that are maybe prepping for a check ride and want to get some practice in their simulator. I've helped people get started who maybe don't have any experience with simulators, who want to make the most out of it. I mean, well that there's a pretty good learning curve just with getting it to simulators and learning everything there is to make that work, to kind of get the simulator out of the way so it feels like flying an airplane.
It's funny. People say with X-Plane, especially with the capabilities of being open-ended, as we say, a lot of us spend the majority of the time, working with X-Plane and getting it looking good and working right. And then we do a little bit of flying. I literally can go weeks. I happen to do scenery design, and I know a lot of guys in the back that do that too, with the airports and WED and whatnot. And then I'll go, you know what, I haven't flown for a while. And there's just something about getting in there. So you're like me, an old Microsoft guy that came around. Now you're into X-Plane, and you use X-Plane in your private tutoring. Thoughts about X-Plane? Your technology background's got. Aren't you amazed at where we are in 2018? With the technology in this simulation?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I mean, I started with X-Plane on X-Plane 10, and now that's exclusively what I fly. But yeah, I mean, the remote coaching, it doesn't matter what simulator you're using because I'm just connecting over Skype typically. So there have been people that use Prepared or FSX or whatever for that too.
And at the end of your training, I'm trying to say the nice way of saying this. They're at a point they feel confident to go on by themselves, obviously, either with a check ride or continue to get their ticket. I know, one of our guys that works with us worked with you and went through the CAT ratings.
Yeah, there's a whole range of people that do it. I mean, you might be totally comfortable operating on the network, but you want to get more IFR practice, and so come on and do some instrument flights. So it's not necessarily people that are getting started out on the network or are completely at square one. It's a whole range of people.
Right. Now let's go take a step back real quick. We have CAT ratings and we have I ratings. Let's talk about the differences.
Yeah, I suppose I mentioned that without explaining what it is. The CAT ratings it's communications and airspace training is what the CAT stands for. And it's a series of 11 flights, I think it is, that starts out simple. They're VFR flights, and they kind of ramp up in complexity as you go along and introduce new concepts. So the first flight is just a non-towered airport to another non-towered airport. You make the CTAF calls, make the flight. The next flight, you go to a Class D airport, and the controllers are actually grading these pass-fail. So on your initial call up, you make whatever normal call that you would make, but you tack on that you're flying the Cat 2 rating, for example. And when you finish, the controllers will give you a pass or a fail. And if it's a pass, you get added to the roster. You can go on to the next rating. And it's a really well-designed program.
What are the parameters for pass-fail, if you're allowed to say?
Yeah, some of it is right on the ratings themselves. Generally, if you don't mess up too bad and you hit the
if you don't crash the plane, you're good.
Yeah. I mean, the controllers are busy. If you do the ratings on a day when there's 30 pilots online, they're not watching you. They're not watching your every move. It's not like they assign someone to just watch you. But the controllers do a good job of judging whether you've demonstrated that you understand the sort of key concepts of the rating, or at least haven't messed them up on that flight.
One of the things I've read and learned and talked to people about is the fact that there were people, and there probably still are today, I don't know, that sign up the Pilot Edge and they look over the CAT ratings and one, that's pretty easy. That's just a non-towered, and then number 2 is, New Caima, whatever you call it, over to St. Louis Obispo. I think I'm going to start with number 5. It's discouraged to do that. And I don't know, maybe it's not even allowed anymore to do that.
Well, they won't give you a grade on it unless you've completed the ones before it.
Okay.
You can go on Pilot Edge and do whatever flight you like. I mean, there's the experience can be as structured or as unstructured as you like, but I would say it's highly recommended to start with those flights, even if you've got some experience. I mean, even if you're a real world pilot, I think you'll pick up some things. Don't be the guy that shows up for the first flight in a 747 at LAX.
Oh, come on. Why not? Let's have some fun. I do have some questions from the audience. Wants to know, do you work with sim pilots that have zero real world experience?
Yeah. So, I know of at least one person who I did the CAT ratings course with last spring, who didn't have any real world experience, but knew he wanted to start with flight training and wanted to kind of get a head start on it by doing these ratings. And he started flight training shortly after we finished. Last I heard, he was just wrapping up his solo cross countries. So,
wow.
In the real world. So yeah. And he said it helped him quite a bit.
That's good. That's got to be a great feeling for you. I mean, great satisfaction in what you do. And you take somebody with zero experience in flying an airplane. And I always say that it's not rocket science. It's just a lot of attention to detail and an attitude and a commitment of it's not a game. It's not a simulation. You get behind a real world airplane, you better know what you're doing, because once you take off, takeoff's easy, right? I mean, the plane will probably take off by itself. It's everything else involved to get yourself back on the ground and don't hurt yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I should say with Pilot Edge, some people say, um, some of the people that I talk to at the airport, like I'm an experienced instrument pilot. I know how I'm comfortable on the radios. This is what people say. So I don't really need this air traffic control practice, but it's so much more than that. It's not about practicing the ATC so much as it is, especially for IFR flights, getting the workload correct on these flights. The right workload at the right moments, and it adds that dynamic element that you get in a real flight and some accountability where now you're flying your simulator, but you've got someone who's going to call you out on your mistakes.
Absolutely.
It's that much more realistic and intense than it would be if you're just shooting your local approaches on the simulator over and over.
It's so true that, again, I've been flying simulators for more years than I care to think about. And you get to a comfortable place and you almost get, I don't want to say blasé about it, but you're just very comfortable and you're in your comfort zone. You add that element of a real person telling you to do something or anticipating that you have to ask somebody to do something. It's a whole new ballgame. It's a complete immersion into the world of flight simulation that you do not get anywhere else. Somebody said very intimidating. I'm going to disagree with Edward Lang. He said it's very intimidating. I don't know that it's intimidating. I guess it would be. That's a very personal thing.
Yeah, you wouldn't be alone in that idea. And there's plenty of real world pilots that I've worked with who are obviously nervous about talking on the radio on Pilot Edge, at least as much so as they are in real life. So that's not a unique opinion.
Right.
But I think the next question on there is, what's the best way to get started? That follows right from that intimidating comment. I think if you start with the recommended flights, start with there's a first flight that's recommended there, and then go into the CAT ratings. That's a good way to just start simple and ease your way into more complex things.
I think the first flight is very similar to CAT 1.
It's you start at Oceano and you just go up to San Luis Obispo, I think, and it's like a 15-mile flight from a non-towered airport to a towered airport, and the description on the website spells out all the radio calls. It gives you a transcript, and of course with the transcripts, that's just a sample. I mean, part of the appeal of live ATC is that it is dynamic and things change. But
couple things to the guys in the back. We're going to run over, not a problem. I got nowhere to go, and we got a lot of questions. We're going to run through them real quick. What do you recommend for training tools other than Pilot Edge?
Well, I think having a good simulator at home is a good start. Obviously, everybody we're talking to here has that. As far as actual, training materials, I mean, there's always the FAA stuff that's free that you can get, things like the Airplane Flying Handbook.
Right.
I like Rod Machado's stuff a lot.
Very good. He's very good.
Yeah, if you can handle the humor.
Cartoons.
Yeah, and the cartoon.
The cartoons.
Yeah, no, but he does a really good job of presenting material in a way that's thorough, but doesn't get too far into the weeds. I like Rob Machado's stuff a lot.
Question from MaxFly, weather guy here. How much weather training do student pilots receive today? It's a general question. It's a great question, and I'll let you answer first.
Yeah, weather training. So you're going to get 3 hours at least of training on flight by reference to instruments, where you're wearing the hood and you're flying just by reference to instruments. So that's not training you to fly in weather. That's training for the emergency situation where a non-instrument pilot flies themselves into the clouds and needs to turn around and get out, right? Other than that, I mean, there's not really any. Are you talking more about ground instruction or?
I would think Max is talking about ground instruction, and let me take it a step further. When I went through my training, I'm an old weather geek from a previous life. When I was in radio, I studied weather. I lived in the Midwest in Kansas, and I watched tornadoes and blah, 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 all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. So I've always been fascinated by weather. But from my side of the coin, from my opinion, I think one of the things lacking in training for pilots, for students today, I'm talking about general aviation just to get you private, is there's not a lot of information dealt to study the weather. They go over the weather, and there's questions on the written that you got to know about. But as you say, getting into the weeds, it's really not there a lot. And I don't know if you take it a step further with your training and the the instrument part of it. I have friends that went through the commercial. It's something that I'm shocked that we don't pay more attention to, because it's such a variable. Because we don't know what's going to happen, and we don't know. You can read weather all day long, and it might not work out to be exactly what it was. Today was a perfect example. The forecast all week long here in northern Illinois was sunny and beautiful today. What they didn't tell us, and we woke up this morning, winds gusting at 25 out of the west all day long. That affects how you want to fly, and if you're going to fly.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Weather theory for private pilots is pretty shallow. What's required? There's more emphasis on weather, reading weather charts and weather reports and interpreting them and what their implications are for the flight that you're making. But weather theory is a little bit lighter. Go into a little more detail on it for instrument training. Yeah, I teach an instrument ground school, or I have the last couple of years, and we've got one day that's on weather. And it's hard to fit everything I'd like to in 1 2-hour session. But if you go on for more than 2 hours on weather, you start to lose people.
Yeah, it's not the most exciting thing unless you're weird like me, and I just love weather. And you're right.
No,
they go to what's required by the FAA, make sure they understand the basic clouds and fronts and whatnot. But weather theory, as Max can attest to, it could be a career. I'm not saying you need to understand the nitty gritty, but I just always thought that, and radio communications. We're talking about pilot edge, especially in the Midwest where we are. You don't have to use the radios in non-towered areas. There's nothing in the book that says you have to. Why somebody would not use a radio? I fly out of Peru, Illinois. We've talked about it. You don't have to use your radio. I think that's insane. I mean, I do.
Yeah, well, I mean, you don't have to have a radio, so some airplanes don't have electrical systems, and that's understandable. But if you had one, you certainly should
be using it. Should be using it.
Know how to use it right. And in this area where there's not a lot of airspace to deal with either, it's easy to go through training and years of flying without really dealing with airspace, or just avoiding places where you need to talk to anyone. Avoiding using flight following, which is a tool you should probably use on pretty much every VFR cross-country flight.
Again, I'm going to assume that most of our audience knows flight following, what it is. Give us a brief description real quick.
Flight following, you're talking to a center controller, a radar controller, who is just like it sounds, following your flight on radar and calling out any potential traffic conflicts.
And a center would be for us here in the Midwest, like a Chicago center. You may not live in Chicago. I'm thinking, do you guys up where you are, you Chicago? Who do you use?
We're Minneapolis Center, and we're 200 miles from Minneapolis. So the center facilities cover a pretty good chunk of the country each. They're just named for one of the major cities within their boundaries.
Within the boundaries, and you're right. You call up and you say, I'd like flight following to, Indianapolis, and you can do that anytime with any flight. It doesn't have to be filed, especially if you're doing VFR. It's something that you should have. If they're busy, they'll tell you, and they may not. They don't have to give it to you. Am I correct?
That's right. Yep.
But usually I've yet to find somebody that wouldn't. And it's just another little tool that you have, because you can't keep your eyes on everything, and you don't know what's coming at you. You don't know what's coming behind you, and you can only hope that everybody's playing by the same rules. So
yeah, it's impressive sometimes how much traffic you don't see. When you get traffic on the iPad, for example, you'll see all these targets that you never would have seen without the iPad.
Oh, and ForeFlight or whatever, Garmin Pilot. Yep. Yeah.
And then when you realize that, depending on your equipment, you're not seeing every aircraft on there either.
Correct.
So things like flight following is, it's a good tool to see things that you're not going to see otherwise.
So from being on the inside, give me your perspective of the future of flight training and aviation. Are we going to always have a shortage, or are we going to overcome this? Because I know there's a call for a lot of pilots.
I don't know. I don't know. I guess I don't know a lot about the details of the pilot shortage. other than that it exists, and it's supposed to be for real this time.
Oh, it is.
Oh, I know it is. Yeah, but when I was just getting out of college, when I was instructing in St. Cloud, there were a lot of my coworkers instructing then that got hired for airlines at 300 hours and a brand new commercial certificate, and they mostly all got laid off a few months later when it turned the other way. Now you can't get hired at the airlines with 250 hours in a commercial, so it's a little bit different. But my understanding is this shortage is supposed to stick around.
So there's opportunities for everybody except people like me that are, too old to do this.
Yeah.
My next life. It would be great.
Right.
Again, it takes a certain individual who wants to pursue a career in aviation, only because, you're not going to get your commercial rating at 25 or whatever the number is and go work for American Airlines. You might work for a puddle jumper somewhere or a little transport. It takes years and a lot of hours and a lot of dedication. And in the beginning, you're not going to make a lot of money. It's got to be a passion. It's got to be a love that you just want to fly and have somebody else pay for the gas, but you can log it into your logbook and put the hours down.
Yeah, I mean, there's money in it eventually, but you have to put in your years of right seat at a regional or something similar before you get there.
Absolutely. What else do you want to cover before we say goodnight? Anything we missed? Now's your turn.
I don't know. Yeah. Not that I can think of.
Right,
I mean,
I really do. Seriously, I want to thank you because I've been looking forward to this for a couple of weeks. I know our schedules, kind of went back and forth a little bit. What you do for the pilots and the instruction side, I think it's great, and more power to you. The Pilot Edge thing, I love Pilot Edge. Everybody knows that. And I'm not saying it because anybody's paying me to say it. I'm saying it because I believe in it. And, honestly, I'm paying the $20 a month, and this month I don't even use it. I mean, It's just one of those things. Life gets in the way or something else. I highly recommend everybody checking it out. They can get a hold of you through Pilot Edge down the highway if your schedule allows, correct?
Yeah, I've got some other projects going on right now, so I'm not actively doing the remote coaching for at least the next few months, but I expect that I will be again next year. But yeah, if you go to pilotedge.net and under Pilot Center, there's remote coaching. You can see some of the information there, and there's a contact form there too. So. And
your flight school is on Facebook, I know.
Yeah, it's Wausau Flying Service in Wausau, Wisconsin.
WAUSAU, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
It's a great little. You had a big insurance company up there, I thought, at one time. Correct? Wausau Insurance years ago.
That could be. Yeah, I'm from just down the road in Stevens Point, so it's about a 45-minute.
One of my earliest flights was up to your area. Ryan, thanks for joining us tonight live on the show on the Voice of X-Plane. I can't thank you enough. Let's do it again. Let's do it again sometime.
Sounds good. Yeah, I had a good time.
Thank you. Good night.
All right. See ya.
And to everybody listening, I can't thank you guys enough. It was great. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks.